Welcome back to Madman Review. So, fellow madmen, it's with great pleasure that I'll talk about two of the latest positive developments concerning our ongoing fight against agencies infringing on our 2A rights. Yep, you heard that right. Our allies and GOA just put the brakes on the ATF's funding train. Feels nice to chalk up a win for Team Second Amendment, doesn't it? It's like whack-a-mole with those anti-gun folks and their never-ending schemes to swipe your God-given right to protect yourself. This year, though, we served them a double whammy. They didn't just cut the ATF's allowance, they also threw a wrench in Brandon's plans for axing the Veterans Affairs fiduciary rule that was keeping veterans from getting firearms if they needed someone to help them with their finances. But hold up, we'll circle back to that juicy bit. Now, diving into the ATF funding fiasco, Brandon was forced to slash the ATF budget by a whopping $122 million. Big round of applause for GOA and the 2A community, please. Sure, the ATF has not yet been kicked to the curb completely, but let's not downplay the moment because, well, this is still a big deal. I mean, we're talking about the biggest budget cut the ATF has ever seen since they set up shop in 1973. There's never been a heftier slice off their financial pie, marking a historic win against those who'd love nothing more than to see you unarmed and vulnerable. What this forced budget cut means. Out of that $122 million, $75 million was yanked from building funds, and the remaining $47 million was snatched right from the ATF's daily bread and butter. Translation: fewer agents on the prowl for your slightly too short barrels or makeshift firearms. And get this, it's the total opposite of what Sleepy Joe had on his wish list for 2023. He was aiming for a 133% budget boost for the ATF. Before our allies forced this budget cut, the ATF's wallet had gotten 36% fatter under Brandon's watch and over 50% since Obama's time in office. But the ATF didn't see this budget slash coming, and now they're probably playing musical chairs to figure out who's left without a seat. We'll keep you posted on how many feds will have to look elsewhere for their paycheck to meddle with your rights as soon as we catch wind of it. Giving the GOP a pep talk. All right, in the sequel here, 2A advocates showed the whole Republican squad and the head honchos that slicing the ATF's budget isn't a game of chicken they're destined to lose. Typically, our political friends get cold feet about budget cuts because the left has them spooked, painting the ATF as some kind of noble law enforcement squad. Comparing the ATF with its grand plan to brand 40 million Americans as felons over a pistol brace to the real deal crime fighters is like comparing apples to, well, hand grenades. It's a ridiculous mental gymnastics routine courtesy of our leftist pals. Then there was the worry about some that chopping the ATF's funds would lead to Americans being cut off from their gun rights. Kind of like holding the unconstitutional NFA times hostage. That's exactly why GOA stepped in to holler at Congress about not swinging the axe without safeguarding against such strong-arm moves. Guess what? Those safeguards made it into the final cut. The bill didn't just throw a shield over gun owners, it also nudged the ATF to cut the nonsense with their eternal waiting periods. And lo and behold, the ATF actually started moving faster, with e-forms zooming through approval at warp speed. Plus, there's this slick tweak that's supposed to let you tweak your form without having to start from scratch if there's a hiccup. Handy, isn't it? But wait, there's a but. It ain't all perfect. Right after Brandon signed off on the epic budget cut, he turned around and pitched a 20% hike to the ATF's funds for the next round, aiming to pump it up to nearly $2 billion. Let me walk you through some of the gems in this wish list. First in line, the bipartisan Save Our Communities Act, or as people fondly call it, the Cornyn-Murphy Compromise. Believe it or not, this toddler-age bill is still a Trojan horse for more gun control. Brandon's DOJ is dreaming of $125 million for the ATF and FBI to keep the party going with all sorts of nonsense, including the sneaky engaged in the business rule for backdoor universal registration checks. Just a friendly reminder, this could land you in hot water for illegal selling a gun without ever actually selling a gun. Slapping on waiting periods for 18 to 20-year-olds wanting to buy guns, tossing federal cash at red flag laws for confiscating guns. And isn't it sketchy that the DOJ magically found the funds for a red flag resource center with Johns Hopkins right after the budget talks? Oh, and they're dead set against using any funds to help teachers defend their classrooms with guns. This bill's about to bulk up the ATF's crew enforcing the Cornyn Murphy gun control extravaganza by a whopping 350%. That's 272 more gun-grabbing bureaucrats ramping up the enforcement of all these nasty pieces of legislation I just rattled off. The grand total, they're aiming to add 675 new faces at the ATF, with 199 of those being agents ready to jump on any fresh gun control schemes Brandon dreams up. And let's not forget the cherry on top, $44 million to beef up their gun registry digs in West Virginia. This is the same spot where GOA stumbled upon a gun registry not too long ago, and now they want to supersize it. Their excuse? Needing more space for the guns they've snagged, all 14,000 of them. And get this, to start nabbing 3D printers too. I bet some keyboard warriors gonna pop into the comments like, but hey, that tracing center is super important for cops, right? Well, let me just drop a line from ATF head honcho Steve DeBach in 2021, who said less than half the country's cop shops even bother with the trace system. Doesn't sound like the essential crime-fighting tool they make it out to be, huh? But don't sweat it, our Second Amendment champions and the folks at GOA have a game plan to turn these ATF wishlisters' dreams into nothing more than fantasy, keeping them from diving into taxpayer pockets to mess with our rights. Kicking the veterans' gun ban to the curb. This past March, our pro-2A allies managed to corner Sleepy Joe into making a big pro-gun move. He snuck a little something into a bill he couldn't ignore, and voila! The VA can no longer slap veterans on the NICS no-fly list just because they've got someone managing their finances. Talk about a win, especially with the current admin trying to rewrite the Second Amendment. For those out of the loop, the fiduciary rule was some serious outreach from the VA back in the 90s. They figured if a vet needed help managing their benefits, they might as well label them as mentally defective. The same term you'd use for someone who's been involuntarily committed. Over 3 decades, this logic sent the names of over 250,000 veterans to the NICS, stripping them of their right to own firearms. But hey, we put the brakes on that train. How'd we get here? Rewind to the dawn of NICS with the system up and running, states and federal agencies with an anti-gun itch started digging for names to dump into this registry. Enter the Clinton crew, nudging their pencil pushers to scrounge up any name that could be wedged into the prohibited box. But here's the kicker. Most of these agencies came up empty-handed on actual criminals. However, the VA, in a move that redefined low blow, decided to flag 83,000 vets who had the audacity to use a fiduciary for their VA benefits as gun ownership no-goes. Essentially, the VA took a peek at the federal law's list of no guns for you criteria, which included being legally declared mentally defective or getting committed, and decided it fit perfectly for vets with fiduciaries. Disarming our veterans. You'd think it was a plot from a bad movie, government officials on a mission to disarm veterans. Let's roll the tape back to 2015, the story of John Arnold from Priest River, Idaho. After a stroke left him needing help to manage his finances, the VA decided that was enough reason to strip him of his right to bear arms. Following his stroke in September, the VA concluded Arnold couldn't handle his own finances. a call that somehow extended to him losing his rights under the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act to own, purchase, or sell firearms. It's the little things that sneak past us that balloon into bigger, scarier problems. Arnold was stunned by the support he received. It was a real eye-opener and something he deeply appreciated. But Arnold's case isn't an isolated incident. He's just one of 83,000 veterans caught in the snare of the VA fiduciary rule, which has wrongly tagged over 250,000 veterans as unfit to exercise their Second Amendment rights, effectively demoting them to second-class citizens. Then came the NICS Improvement Amendments Act of 2007, dubbed the Veteran Disarmament Act by critics for cementing the VA fiduciary rule and legitimizing the VA's overreach. This piece of legislation sneaked through after GOP leaders made a deal, letting it pass through both the House and Senate without a formal vote. Talk about a silent bombshell. It solidified the notion that a mere bureaucrat's signature could declare veterans legally incompetent. So, how did we turn the tide? Flash forward, and you have a committee hearing where Chairman Boston Republican Rosendale and other key Congress members convene to scrutinize or mark up Chairman Boss Veteran Second Amendment Protection Act. At the hearing, the VA rep seemed like he was just ticking boxes from an old playbook, totally unfazed by the fact that veterans were being stripped of their rights. Following the spectacle, Chairman Boss made his move, sliding his bill into the Veterans Affairs Funding bill like a pro, and boom, got a thumbs up from the House with support from both sides. But not without its drama queens like Republican Wasserman, who basically said, by law they can't own guns. If we assign them a fiduciary, we gotta flag them in the National Instant Criminal Background Check System because legally they're seen as mentally unfit. Really, Republican Wasserman? Equating a VA desk jockey's call to being legally judged, might as well let me make the call. Then Senator Kennedy steps up, slinging the same amendment into the Senate's funding bill, and wouldn't you know it, it gets bipartisan love there too. The plot thickens. You'd think with both the House and Senate greenlighting the amendment, it'd be smooth sailing, right? Think again. Merging individual funding bills into one mega bill was like herding cats, especially for those of us more interested in fine-tuning our aim, camoing up our gear, or literally anything else. Predicting what makes the final cut in these Franken bills is always a wild ride, which is why GOA leaned on Speaker Johnson to ensure the VA couldn't blacklist vets in NICS, and they pulled it off. But it wasn't all high fives and victory laps. The deal also resuscitated the Undetectable Firearms Act of 1988 for another 7 years, putting a damper on the celebration. GOA couldn't back the entire package, leading many allies to vote no due to the gun control stowaway. However, there's a silver lining. The amendment pissed off enough anti-gunners to flip their votes to no, calling the bill too gun-friendly. The icing on the cake? Brandon had no choice but to sign off on it, pro-gun amendments and all. Getting that guy to endorse pro-gun law is not just a win for vets, it's a victory lap for all of us. The fight's not over yet. The ATF's budget is still on the table, and the outdated Undetectable Firearms Act of 1988 hangs over us. But that's all we have for you today. If this video is helpful or entertaining, please help us grow by clicking on the like, share, and subscribe buttons. Tap that notification bell too so you're always updated on the latest Pro 2A news. Thanks for watching, and God bless America.